This also tells us something else, and that is something we've been neglecting for so long in Western debates about immigration, and that culture is a thing, and it's really important. And it's important because what it means, what do we mean when we say culture, is all of the values that bind us together, and it's our social contract. And if the social contract is being attacked, we don't know how to live together anymore. Yeah. And so one thing that Goodhart is very good at in the UK is an author, David Goodhart, and we have been pretending for so long, especially through the 90s, with this word multiculturalism, that one culture is not in any way better than another. And so I think it was you and Sam, actually, both of you have been asked this question and posed this question before. And there is only one unequivocal answer to this question. Is what we enjoy here in Australia and the culture that we enjoy, however you want to define it, better than the culture that the Taliban want to create in Afghanistan? And there is only one unequivocal answer to that, and is yes, obviously. And you're being, again, people are gaslighting you if they equivocate in the answer to that question.
Yeah, I do think that that's unnecessary. I agree with that statement. So it's better here than the Taliban. Let's be clear.
I'll give way in a second.
The flat whites are much better here than they are in Kabul.
All I'm going to say is that so we've got to at least recognize that culture is as important to this debate as how fast or slow the immigration rate it should be, because it becomes a political problem.
The point is, that's overkill. Like what you said is true, but there's some people who can't make any value judgments because that would be cruel. Right?
Yeah.
All right, it's not about that.
Yeah.
You guys drive on a side of the road that I don't recognize as being the correct side of the road to an American. All right, is it better to drive on the left side or the right side? No, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that everybody drives on a common side, that you don't have things that are incompatible, right, running into each other. And so if you have some state that says church and state have to be separate, and you have another place that says church and state are the same thing, I don't need to get into a discussion about better or worse or values, because that's unnecessarily value-laden. I know that you don't want those two things. Are the Crips better than the Bloods as a gang? I don't know. I just don't want to house them in the same cell block of the prison, right? So there are certain aspects of this that are simply about compatibility that can evade the value judgment so that we don't have to get into that thorny territory. Now, there is I think way too much of this ends up for an American taste because we don't have the same issues with Islam yet in our immigration situation that Europe has. So in the US situation, what I would say is you have never, ever, ever heard an honest immigration conversation. The people who sound compassionate are not compassionate. You have a class of people I call immigrant-entrepreneurs who are making money based on immigration, like immigration lawyers or people who run pension plans, who are trying to figure these things out from a financial perspective. And what happens is that you have domestic groups transferring money amongst themselves. Like, let me steal some money from over here and give it to some people over here in the same country. The owners of capital say, hey, I see that labor is getting a certain share. If I can use immigration, I can beat down wages by pushing out the supply curve. And then fundamentally, I can capture a giant prize called the Borjas rectangle, just living inside a tiny efficiency gain in economics called the Harburger triangle. So you talk about the Harburger triangle as this little efficiency gain, but the real thing that you're salivating over is if I can just get labor to hate themselves for worrying about immigration, by worrying that there's somehow xenophobic, then fundamentally I can push down wages and make it impossible for people to agitate for more money, better conditions, et cetera, which is why it's so bizarre that the left has been fooled. I mean, it's just amazing. And I was told this by people in Washington. Somebody said to me, you don't understand how brilliant our immigration policy is. If you object to any part of it, you're a xenophobe. So we have a way of getting American labor to give up on itself because we will make them self-hating. Right? This is a conscious part of the conversation. And when I discovered in the 90s that in 1986, the American National Science Foundation had done a study of how to keep American scientists from making more money by using visas to make Americans mitigate their wage demands, I thought, this is completely bananas. We're supposed to be drawing our own people into our own fields, and we're secretly plotting against them using economic theory. And what are we doing? We're using immigrants as an invidious tool to transfer money between groups. And then what we do is we say, oh, you wouldn't hurt an immigrant, would you? Well, no, I'm not angry at immigrants at all. I'm angry at domestic rent seekers who have figured out how to manipulate the situation. It doesn't require culture. It doesn't require any discussion of Islam. The key point here is that you have never been allowed to have or hear a conversation about immigration in adult terms where compassion, where self-interest, I guarantee you that there's nobody on this panel who is for open borders, and there is nobody on this panel who is for closed borders. Right?
Just in the European context, though, I think the cultural conversation around Islam is particularly difficult to avoid because you've got citizens of Europe born and raised.
I'm not saying that there is no cultural issue. We have cultural issues in the US as well. And I do think, to be honest, that we benefit from a certain amount of foreign culture to give us hybrid vigor. Right? So it's not that I'm trying to keep American culture pristine and we have to only integrate. I don't want to only integrate. I'm pretty excited about immigrants, and I want to make sure that we have a sustainable stream for generations to come by not binging and purging and doing some sort of violent process that is based upon allowing people to manipulate our heartstrings against our better interests.
And Douglas, and
there's a set of just good practice on this question, as on a lot of other questions, which is not to presume that you can see into the heart of people who disagree with you on an issue, because that is the reason why, as you say, you're a xenophobe if you want to have any textured discussion on it. This does unbelievable damage to the debate, and obviously that's one of the ones it's most pertinent on. But I mean, every single one of the tripwire issues of our time is vulnerable to this claim. I can see into your heart, and I know what you're secretly doing. And none of your words may do this, and none of your actions may do this, but I know what you're really after. This is a very dangerous thing to introduce into debate. Because
and this is what Kathy Newman is, the gift that keeps on giving. Because, we all went through that where, so what you're really saying is the one move.
Right.
And the real thing that comes to this, by the way, one way to solve that, which I've occasionally suggested, is that on this, as on other issues, there should be a punishment for frivolously making a claim that is untrue. So if, for instance, you frivolously claim that the people who disagree with you are all racists, you should suffer some form of societal shame and consequence equivalent to that which you are trying to hand out. Otherwise, there's just no reason not to keep doing it. I mean, I've said this to Sam before. We discussed this on your podcast when I suggested that when people erroneously make various claims against Sam, he should just say, well, it's just a shame you're such a paedophile. And they go, what? And, and if they say, I beg your pardon, he goes, it's not my fault you keep on shagging kids. And they go, what are you, and they go, we're all quite annoyed about it, but, it's and just keep, just keep going on.
Just don't say that to Maajid, because he'll get $3.4 million out of it.
But, you should say, look, you've made an insincere claim about me, and I'm doing one back.